host, Scott Ramp. I'm here to talk about this, that, and the other, all surrounding Missoula, Montana, and the United States and the world as we dive into the weekend. It is currently July 24th. I had to glance over a little bit just to see what date it was, but let's talk a little bit about what's happening in the news. I'll talk about some city council stuff, what's happening within the Missoula County since, of course, our governor, Steve Bullock, in the state of Montana, declared a mandatory mask within businesses and putting the authority to public health officials. So let's start off with that. An all-community council meeting took place vis-a-vis online last night, and I have the rundown on how many communities inside Missoula County, Bonner, Frenchtown, Clinton, and all those organizations, actually community councils, came together and asked questions and were concerned about how they were going to enforce mask wearing in Missoula County. So far, they were able to invite Public Health Officer Cindy Farr from the Missoula City Public Health Department to speak about how the public health departments are complaint-driven and are not actively going to places of businesses to tell people what to do, but it is a complaint-driven. So many of the things that they're trying to do is that if you have an issue with a business that is not enforcing a mask, you call the Missoula City County Health Department and you request it. They go to those places and they don't just say that you should do this. They educate the people on how they can enforce this, not necessarily you figure out how to do more sensitive words and help people. There's a lot of circumstances in place that some people do not need to wear masks, and a lot of times businesses need to do that extra mile being like, please wear your mask, and if they refuse to wear your mask, you'd be like, then you may not enter, and then they say, oh, I have a health condition, I cannot wear a mask. And then you're just like, okay, you can come in here, but you will have to abide by the 6 feet away from people, that kind of thing. There's certain exceptions that are to the rule, but as long as businesses are keeping up to par with enforcing these masks requirements and requesting people wear the mask, they are in the clear from any kind of enforcement, fines, foreclosures, or anything like that. But if you are interested, you can call them as well. So they spoke a little bit about Ravalli County, which they saw officer of public health quit after 13 years in a letter to the county commissioners of Ravalli, saying that it was because the county only made it an optional per the governor's orders. In a Missoula meeting, however, many communities were in compliance with the order, and whether or not dissent within local business and people have yet to be seen. So far, the Missoula Public Health urges people who are unsure about the public gathering events to get in contact with the Missoula City County Health Department for any advice on how to enforce and handle scenarios that may arise. So you have a park gathering, you have a concert or venue like stuff like that, contact the City County Health Department. One prime example is that the Missoula City Band is one example of how there's outdoor public gathering for people trying to figure out ways to make sure people were wearing masks, which people were wearing masks on the Wednesday night concerts, but also adhering to the 6 feet rule as well. Of course, we'll have latest COVID updates in my show a little bit later. Cindy Farr will probably talk about it a little bit more. Of course, one of the big things that are happening as well is that the constant mistrust of China, since the COVID thing kind of started snowballing here in America, is that TikTok, which is actually owned by a Beijing-based company, the U.S. Does and is considering banning the video app in America. So what started out as Wells Fargo banning their employees from having the TikTok because it may be releasing sensitive information has turned its eye into American Congress looking towards the ban. National Security is looking at an old trading with the enemy deal, which is basically looks into really far past about how the Cold War and how we would trade with Russia, and they would figure out how they would squeeze businesses out, which included TikTok. But of course, so far, the information is currently in U.S. servers. TikTok officials based out of America says they would not release any American personal information to Beijing officials if they were asked. But right now, it's kind of figuring out exactly how they're moving forward with this. This is all talk right now, and they're trying to move forward on this. But a lot of people who have TikTok apps are thinking to themselves, they interviewed a couple people on NPR, and they're just like, why would people want to watch my videos of me lip syncing to popular music? But of course, many of the issues that they actually talked about in terms of national security had to do with the fact that advertising. So TikTok's, if you've seen some advertising, they're worried about how advertising could basically manipulate people into the outcome of this election, much like how Facebook did in the 2016 election, revving up to the November election in 2016. So that's one of the things that are kind of happening in the United States as well. But another big thing that's also really associated with American history is baseball. Baseball is back, and Dr. Fauci, he's the lead guy on the COVID-19 in the United States, and he was going to throw the pitch on the very first game Thursday. Of course, many of the stadiums will be empty seats. They'll be broadcasting these games. There'll be 60 games played, but they usually have 162 games that would take its time and would happen in a long season. But in this case, it's going to be 60 games, and it's going to happen really, really fast as they're moving forward with this as well. And so far, out of the 10,000 officials tested, 5 players and 1 official were tested positive for COVID-19. The biggest risk factor within the Major League Baseball is traveling. Many teams have to travel, and one of the biggest teams as well that is also a part of the Major League Baseball is Toronto Blue Jays, based out of Canada. And with the whole travel ban between America and everything like between America and Canada and Mexico, it's also a big issue in terms of that, because Americans aren't allowed to travel across the border until August 21st. And speaking of the ban, one of the biggest things that are happening around the world is that many countries are banning the United States. Europe is a prime example of a lot of countries in Europe are banning American tourists from coming down. So many people who've had plans to travel to other countries, basically all international flights have been grounded from the U.S., and that's something that's kind of staying at this point until the numbers go down or they figure out a way moving forward as well. And like always, this is always kind of like a fluid thing, figuring out exactly how it's going to happen and how, as bad as it gets, these are kind of the steps that are being taken, the precautions that are being made to make sure that things stay put. All right, so that's kind of what's happening in the news today. Here's a couple of new programs that are going to be airing on MCAT this weekend. We're talking about some history of Bonner churches, along with other stuff as well in terms of Lewis and Clark. So here's some new great programs, and I'll be back with some
If you want to glance over your shoulders on the back wall right here, we have the dedication of the second church, which was 1940. They didn't tear down most of the first church, and that the 1905 church is still stands right next door here and turned towards the school.
My folks had to get married in Frenchtown because that wasn't big enough for a wedding.
They said they had the weddings in Frenchtown and the funerals in Bonner. I don't know why that was.
This is from Uttarakhand, which is in northern India, the foothills of the Himalayas. And it's a relatively small state. But this is, I think, from 2013. There were heavy rains, intense floodings. Many of these buildings were damaged and collapsed. They hadn't been built to code. They hadn't been built to withstand this kind of heavy and punishing rainfall. What happens when you've also in hilly areas like here, you have mudslides coming with these heavy rains that come with climate change. This is in Kashmir, which is one Muslim majority state in India, and which has had an insurgency running for decades. And so I think I'll leave it to you to imagine what happens when you have natural disaster, economic loss, and an insurgency. It's a recipe for further trouble.
So let's get to the whole Lewis and Clark thing, since this is a Lewis and Clark group. So this map we're looking at here and is Nicholas King's map. So before the Lewis and Clark expedition left, Albert Gallatin, the Secretary of the Treasury for Jefferson, commissions this map. And so King makes this map where there's absolutely nothing on it that's quote-unquote conjectural. And they were very concerned about there being conjectural information. These maps, these are supposed to be the most scientific, the most up-to-date, the most Jeffersonian maps that you could get, right? And so rather than assume anything about the interior, people, water, rocky mountains, or otherwise, it was left blank. You know, here is a place to write a new republic. It's Jeffersonian expansionism on paper. And part of the reason why we have these Rocky Mountains that stop right here is because Alexander Mackenzie went through and he saw Rocky Mountains going to the south, but he couldn't really say if they went any further than what he saw. And so they were left off.
Hey guys, welcome back. Let's talk a little bit about movies that are streaming online, blah, blah, blah. The release dates are kind of fluid. It's very weird because these are kind of like the movies that are kind of out, but not really out. But these are a couple of the movies that are just like, bam, that just kind of showed up. And speaking of bam, animal crackers. Yes, you know the famous snack that people ate from many, many years ago, and then people were just like, you know, we could probably make other snacks that probably taste a little bit better. Ooh. I don't want to burn. I'm not sponsored by them. Who cares? I'm not sponsored by anyone. But anyways, Animal Crackers is making a product-type movie. It's kind of like the Emoji Movie in a way where you give personality and characters to Emoji Movies. But I'm pretty sure that Animal Crackers is about basically a little girl who goes to a circus because the Animal Crackers box kind of looks like it's a traveling circus. It's cool. And she meets a person, and they give her magical animal crackers that come to life and kind of save her life from her whatever's going on in her personal life. So it's kind of like where, you know, like a kid is kind of just being a total drip, and then the animal crackers are just like kind of blow up her life, and you'd be like, well, maybe my life isn't as bad as I thought it was. Thanks, animal crackers. I'm going to eat you. Or there's a whole existential crisis that she has to deal with, that maybe I shouldn't actually eat animal crackers because they're really alive. I don't know. This is kind of like one of those weird movies. Animal Crackers. Alright, here is a movie that's also coming out. It's called Baby Splitters. So this is basically the whole idea of that you have two couples, and one of them's just like, hey, I don't want to get preggo, but I want to have kids. And they're just like, well, why don't we just ask our other couple friends who want to have babies to carry our child as well. And like, cool. And so basically that's what the movie's about. It's you have two couples come together, and they want to make a baby together with that, you know, artificial insemination, blah, blah, blah. Egg and sperm comes from one couple, goes into that one lady, and I guess the other guy's kind of like okay with it. And I'm assuming there's going to be some drama or anything like that. But would have actually been really cool. I read the synopsis, and that's kind of what it is. They agree to do it, but it would have been a lot more controversial, a lot better if it was kind of like a mix-up with Jane the Virgin, where it was like, yeah, watch the show. But if the whole purpose of the show, so the thing is, let me just categorize this thing. The thing about this movie is that, how about a better movie would be like they are going to the fertility clinic, both of them, and trying to figure out baby. They freeze their eggs or anything like that, but now they're ready to have kids. And then there's a mix-up, and the lady only has one egg and one chance, and she's like, you have to have my baby. This is my only chance to have a kid. And she's like, I guess so. Guilt me into having your baby. Boom, 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 drama. People getting used to each other and figuring out blah, 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 and all that stuff. I think that would be a much better movie than this movie. All right, let's talk about some games. You like those kind of, from the people who are like, I like customizing a Fortnite, but I like the gameplay of, like, let's say the Gungeon, Into the Gungeon. Well, we have this game for you. Neon Abyss puts on a kind of like a nice Fortnite skin on Into the Gungeon type gameplay. Actually, update. It's more of a side-scrolling adventure, but I guess exiting the dungeon or escape the dungeon, whatever. But anyways, it's basically a shoot-'em-up kind of game in the vein of like 32, 16-bit kind of game consoles, where it's like fairly easy to make, but then they kind of go a little overboard with the modern technology, blah, blah, blah. Anyways, this game is just kind of a cash grab. If you want to waste $20, whatever, who cares? But you know, people like the bright colors of 80s Fortnite kind of feel to it, and they want to do a game where they can shoot each other. That's what you can expect from this game. It's not that special. Just like some of the movies that are coming out this way as well. Have I mentioned Animal Crackers, the movie? Yeah. All right, so up next we have the latest dub and stuff from the 1936 serial Flash Gordon. This is pre-Flash Queen soundtrack Flash movie. So without further ado, here's dub and stuff.
Okay, are we intimidating enough? Well, is anyone gonna answer me? Oh, with this guy again. Ugh.
My liege, I'm here. I have prisoners, and
That's enough. Bring them in. Let me see what we got this time.
Sir, you quite don't understand that he's very quite handsome.
Go, guard. Find out if you can use quite more than once in a sentence. And bring out the prisoners. Whew, almost messed up there. Oh, God, he is gorgeous. Look at those pants. Welcome. I'm the ruler. This is a formality. Any outsider shall be arrested. It's nothing personal. It's just, I'm a leader and I gotta lead by example. You understand that?
Oh, I am the professor. I come from a place called Earth.
And I'm an alien dictator.
Oh, I've met many people in power before. They were quite interesting, but one thing's for sure. Their curiosity outranks their savagery.
Oh, I've been to the Earth. And when I was there, I was like, let's go. Only because I didn't get any mileage for my credit card.
Well, have you shopped around other credit cards? Speaking from experience of being bankrupt a handful of times.
Financial advice? You should not be giving me...
Well, just because I went bankrupt doesn't mean I don't know anything about money.
Well, maybe if I was showing signs of bankruptcy, I would take your advice. This is my accountant, Gene McDonald. He's really good at financial stuff.
I don't know why I bother.
Get out of the way. Get out of the way.
Oh, no.
Is she prettier than me?
It's my
she looks
wife.
prettier than me. Oh, but look at that guy.
Alright, I'm getting up. This is what happens when you make me get up. It's not pretty. Hold her. Now you see here, because you're a lady coming to my castle, you have to marry me. It's the law of the land, and I make the law. All your desires will be met. My credit score is 850. Whoa!
Now you listen here. You stay away from her. I don't want you to see her with her.
Nice Batman voice. Get him.
I hope you like face in your face.
Oh wow, is he trying to sound tough, or is it just like Batman face? Oh, now he's got a sword. But come on, guys.
I got him.
Oh yeah, there, that's easy. Sure you're tough one-on-one, but I got a whole bunch of guards. What are you thinking? Still fine.
A big push for wastewater, stormwater, water bill to be a monthly deal in Missoula is moving forward. Last week they were kind of discussing having open for the public. Brian Von Losberg from the City Council talks a little bit more about rates within the city of Missoula.
Water rates, since the acquisition, the water rates are actually lower than when the condemnation proceedings began. That was a result, and this came up in some letters to council, and I just thought it would be good to highlight here that the water utility under private ownership was penalized by the Public Service Commission for their unapproved transaction during the condemnation proceedings to the Canadian utility. And as a result of that, rates were lowered around their cost of capital, and we have continued to utilize those lower rates. So rates are actually lower than when the condemnation proceeding began.
Back a couple of years ago, the Carlisle Group, which owned the Mountain Water Company, they've owned it for many, many years. The city of Missoula had a whole legal battle with them had a condemnation hearing, and they were able to obtain the ability to purchase the water company. And then they had another hearing in terms of like how much they would have to pay. They gave us an exorbitant large amount of number, and we'd just be like, this is a fair price for what we're getting. And then they just kind of split it down the middle, which they usually do. And that was kind of like the deal. So basically, Missoula Water is what it's called now, out of the Montana Missoula Water Utility, and they want to basically put this sewer, stormwater, and water will all appear on a monthly bill. And originally, the wastewater bill was a kind of like a biannual, so you'd get a check. You'd have to get a bill every 6 months, and they're just spacing it out to make it even, so everyone pays one bill rather than having that bill come up later on. So this will be starting in January of 2021, so you guys can look forward to that on your bills. Last week, the city is working an affordable housing trust fund. Many public comments were critical of whether the city was going to raise taxes or using this as a slush fund. Edie Morris gives a public comment on the affordable trust.
My neighbors in our ward, often they don't struggle with housing as much as in other wards in this city. And I think that it's really important for us all to remember that we have to think outside of our worldviews. And we have to think about the people who come to this place because maybe they don't have anywhere to go. Maybe they think there's safe family here, and the safe family here is not as safe for them. And when they come here, they take jobs and they take whatever they can get, and they're helping us. They're cleaning our houses. They are washing our dishes. They are serving us food in restaurants, putting themselves at risk of COVID-19. And because they have to take the jobs that they can get, they can't afford very much for rent. And they have to live in places where maybe they wouldn't choose. They didn't come here early, and some of them weren't born here. Some of them were. And that's even worse, right? To be part of an intergenerational struggle for secure housing. So
affordable housing isn't only an issue in Missoula, but a nationwide problem, as we are actually seeing record highs of unemployment rates, and those working are putting themselves at risk for opening of the economy. Actually, I got to reread that for you guys. So part of this is that the high unemployment rates are also putting people at risk for COVID-19, which for a lot of people, because once you get the virus, you're basically kind of not at work. So you're stuck at home, not working, not getting paid. That's a whole nother issue that people are putting themselves at as well. Edie Morris also mentioned that this would be involve an oversight committee made up of members of the community on par with historic preservation and city board of adjustment. Mayor John Engen also mentioned last week in my city council report that the housing board was established 5 years ago to help people get into affordable houses, and this trust fund is basically how they're going to help people keep affordable housing low. So Heidi West talks more about oversight.
We are uniquely positioned to set up a housing trust fund and a governing structure that will operate without any of the current players in the room. The appointments to this board will be made by the mayor, the Missoula City Council, and the Missoula County Commissioners. All of these appointments will go through a public process and allow for public input. The amendment does not include specific reference to non-governmental, nonprofit entities for the primary reasons that organizations are short-lived, have short institutional memories, and shift focus when compared to the longevity of an ordinance. For similar reasons, citizen coalitions are not recognized with a set-aside seat because they are hard to define, verify, and are fluid entities. However, with the proposed amendment to the ordinance, none of these entities are excluded. It is our job as policymakers to create a welcoming and inclusive policy that allows for diverse representation without defining who we think is important.
Last week, a couple organizations were concerned about the overreaching that this trust would do to folks, but from the clip that you just heard, would continue this trust beyond any one person or group that may shift policies in the long run, new council and mayor included. This goal is to make apolitical, since housing is a human need. That's one of the big terms that is happening as well. But one of the things that Murder Becerra reflects on is the guiding factors in this Affordable Housing Oversight Committee.
It is important for us to be thinking in a more inclusive way. I believe that the language that we currently have will get us to meaningful and authentic composition of an oversight committee. I believe that being too prescriptive in terms of the representation that we have on a committee when not met, when those criteria are not met, could render that committee inoperable. And I believe that it can result in tokenism. I believe we shouldn't be bound by percentages or numbers, that we should always strive for as much inclusivity as we can possibly have and find in our community.
Benny LaKyle gives a public comment, and he spoke last week about how this oversight committee should be a 1/3 non-white representation. There's a lot of minority groups of non-white folks living in Missoula who don't get their voices heard, and this is what he had to say.
As you consider this policy, please consider that these requests originated from many Black, Indigenous, and other people of color, ourselves, that hundreds of citizens have educated themselves on this, and dozens have put many hours of research and debate into the request we are putting before you. If we were in person, they would be standing here tonight. Also, we understand that having these requirements put into the ordinance itself makes it difficult to change in the long run, versus making a general diversity statement like, the committee will be made up of diverse representation.
There were other suggestions, but tends to surround who's who when it comes to the oversight committee. Overall, lots of the people are in support of this, but the amount of money to be put towards housing trust fund had many folks scratching their heads. Heidi West from City Council talks about how properties can stay affordable through this trust.
And we've seen a couple scenarios in our community where the city has stepped in, for example, with a very low or zero interest loan to help Homeward, for example, purchase rental housing that is affordable but sunsetting. So we have housing that is currently affordable in our community that has a time clock, a point at which it expires. And at that point, it can either be converted to market rate, someone can keep it affordable, or we can actively engage in protecting those properties. And then the second interpretation that I would see is that this trust fund will deal with a spectrum of affordability up to 120%, if I'm understanding its function correctly, in line with our housing policy, in which case we might occasionally run into naturally occurring affordable housing, where there could be mechanisms to purchase those homes. The county, for example, is pioneering a scattered site community land trust model currently in partnership with Trust Montana, where market rate homes are going to be purchased and made affordable. So I think that it has less to do with the future of affordable homes than the ones that are existing now, and making sure that they stay in our community.
How it's kind of explained throughout this, it kind of a light bulb kind of shined in my head about how they're moving forward with this. Much like how the open space bond that was passed back in 2005, purchasing land, keep it natural, available for trails and people to have access to trails and stuff like this. This trust fund is kind of on par in terms of open space, in a way to acquire funds and money to not only be able to create affordable housing, but also maintain it. Because that's a big thing. Just because you create affordable housing, maybe 5-10 years from now, it's like, oh, the affordable housing is now not on par with that. And that's part of what this trust fund is trying to do, moving forward with this as well. Heather Hart from the City Council talks about the struggles that the city faces with this ordinance.
We have this ordinance, but we also have the resolution. And the resolution provides the framework of acknowledging all the missteps of the past and recognizing that we can take steps in the right direction now going forward. And part of what is required of this whole process is trust. And I know this is a really big ask of the public, but you elected every one of us here to represent you. And you have to trust us that the next step, when we go to actually do our appointments, whether it's from the mayor's office, it's from city council or the county commissioners, that you will trust us to take everything you have given us in terms of feedback and make sure that the committee that is going to be appointed this first time around is going to be diverse, and it's going to be inclusive of as many folks as we can have at the table.
Of course, as an ordinance, the framework is trying to be a little more solid, but the only time they can do any kind of major adjustments is through committee meetings and city council approval in the long run. But this is going to be a lot of work in trying to find money that can go towards affordable housing and sustaining it. The city spoke on many avenues, from citizens that are underrepresented to people who work multiple jobs that they don't get enough time to voice their concerns and opinions. Primarily, they want to figure out a way to get more renters in this committee to be on it as well. But before the committee is formed, they have to have approval of this trust fund. Of course, the resolution was approved for the trust fund. They're not currently forming the board, as in they passed the ordinance that would be the backbone of what this board would be about. So up next, passenger rail system. That's a big thing that's kind of happening within the city of Missoula, the county of Missoula, and the state of Montana. At first, when I noticed Dave Strohmeyer, the Missoula County Commissioner, wanted to bring back the passenger rail, I was skeptical myself. I was just like, oh, okay. I wonder how many communities are really going to want to do this. But Dave Strohmeyer, the man who's been passenger rail, to come back talk some more about it.
So this is just not about nostalgia or folks dressing up in their conductor outfits occasionally and reminiscing about the good old days. This is a little bit back to the future, and I think investing strategically in a greener, more sustainable, and certainly a more equitable mode of transportation for many of our constituents and friends and neighbors. So,
one thing I have to ask is how. Many ways the county has put this into focus is simply to put up feelers of other counties. In Montana, currently the state of Montana does not have a structure to create an infrastructure, which makes it easier for communities to self-govern. The bones are there, and the passenger cars do exist. You know, they have Amtrak, Mountain Line bus systems basically rent their buses and can provide systems of transportation to the city. That's kind of how a lot of transportations within the city works as well. Dave Strohmeyer continues talking more about who would actually run the passenger rail system in Montana.
This authority, much like maybe a port authority or other independent districts, is an independent governing body. So it's not an advisory board or body, it is a governance body itself. So you can see we stretch all the way thus far from the edge of Idaho to the edge of North Dakota, about 630 miles in width. And if Webo County can get on board with this, there is no excuse for the other gray counties. So hopefully with a little peer pressure, eventually they will join in the mix.
Mr. Strohmeyer also mentions that the counties still have enough time to get on board when they begin to form, but most of the counties along the rail lines have not voiced their opposition. So far, 11 counties have agreed to be a part of this idea. Of course, that number might have been updated because I just recently listened to another meeting, so maybe about 12 or 13 counties from Missoula County all the way to, I believe it was, not Yellowstone County, I know that, but there was another county that was maybe Deerhorn or something like that, but I digress. This was a presentation, and they will have a big summit. One of the big summits is happening on September 17th to discuss this. This is happening in Missoula. Anyone who likes trains and those who are enthusiastic about having a passenger rail system are asked to go onto their website. It's called MontanaPassengerRailSummit.org. I'll put it down here below for you guys, MontanaPassengerRailSummit.org for more information. But as always, if you like City Council as much as I do, and you want to learn more about how your city government is working and doing, and you can't get enough of us, go to ci.missoula.mt.us. But if you get more confused, be sure to navigate mcat.org for all your local programs and local city government and more. This concludes my City Council report. Let's talk a little bit more COVID with the latest public health update in Missoula County.
Hi, my name is Cindy Farr, and I'm the Incident Commander for the Missoula City County Health Department's COVID-19 response. Today's Thursday, July 23rd, and this is my daily briefing. To date, we've had 194 cumulative positive cases of COVID-19 in Missoula County. That's up 7 since yesterday. 187 of those cases were identified by testing, and 3 were epi-linked. We've had 138 recoveries and 1 death. 1 Missoula County resident and 4 non-county residents are currently hospitalized in Missoula County, and we currently have 55 active COVID-19 cases with more than 270 close contacts. Active cases and their known contacts are in quarantine and isolation, and they will continue being monitored and supported as needed. The state of Montana is reporting 2,910 cumulative COVID cases, which is up 97 cases since yesterday. There are now 1,280 active cases with 54 active hospitalizations across the state, and there have been 43 deaths related to COVID-19 statewide. First, I want to revisit and clarify the local and statewide face covering mandates. Our local Board of Health unanimously approved a countywide face covering rule 2 weeks ago on July 9th. Our governor implemented a statewide face covering rule 1 week ago on July 15th. In Missoula County, residents and visitors 5 years of age and older are required to wear protective cloth face coverings when inside public settings, as well as in some outdoor settings when safe distancing cannot be maintained per the governor's directive. In Missoula County, our face covering rule is not dependent upon the number of active cases in our county. Face coverings are required in non-public facing spaces of businesses, government offices, and public indoor spaces, except when people can maintain 6 feet or more from other people. There's not an exception in the Missoula County face covering rule for those who are giving a speech or engaging in artistic, musical, theatrical, or cultural performance, provided that the audience is distanced 6 feet away or more from the speaker, and face shields are not an allowable substitute for cloth face coverings. In Missoula County, our face covering rule remains in place until further notice. We, being myself, the Board of Health, the health officer, and other local leadership, continually review local and state information that informs our ongoing safety rules and measures. The local face covering rule and companion health officer order will be reviewed with the Board of Health at least monthly, with ongoing communication throughout each month in between the standing meetings. I've been super grateful to see so much compliance with the face covering rule in our community. I know this is not an easy ask, but it is so important for our health and safety. The face covering helps other folks and reduces the chances of someone unknowingly exposing someone else to COVID-19 when one of those people is either asymptomatic, which is not presenting with any symptoms and doesn't ever present with symptoms, or is pre-symptomatic, which means they're not presenting with symptoms right now, but within the window period of being contagious and will eventually develop symptoms. While we know that the face covering is not 100% effective at eliminating the transmission of COVID-19, we do know that it helps to reduce the transmission. I've seen community members wearing cloth face coverings, and I've seen so many businesses helping with the rule compliance within their organization and public-facing spaces. Tomorrow, our Environmental Health Division is going to present a special daily briefing specific to licensed establishments that will review some of the face covering FAQs, as well as some pro tips for business owners and their staff to continue successfully navigating the face covering rule and compliance within their own environments. Ahead of that special briefing tomorrow, I'd like to review what the health department means when we talk about cloth face coverings. They're just that. They're breathable cloth that fully covers the nose and the mouth, snug fit below the chin, preventing any respiratory droplets from escaping out of the bottom or the sides of the covering. The face coverings that are required are not lace, they're not face shields, they're not coverings with exhalation valves, they are not apiarist or beekeeper coverings. Yes, we've seen those, and they're not medical grade N95 masks or respirators that are best suited to the medical settings for professional healthcare workers that are continuously engaged in patient-client interactions. Every resident and visitor is required to follow the local face covering rule. However, that does not preclude private entities from implementing stricter face covering rules within their establishments. For instance, event organizers for an outdoor event with fewer than 50 people could still require all attendees or participants wear face coverings during that event, which would be stricter than our local rule. A local business may ask patrons to wear cloth face coverings if they are 2 years of age or older, which is also stricter than the local rule, but falls within the CDC guidelines indicating that children under 2 should not wear face coverings. Please continue respecting the local rules as well as the rules within our local establishments. These measures are intended to promote health and safety. These measures also help keep local businesses open by reducing the likelihood of asymptomatic or pre-symptomatic exposure and transmission from patron to patron, or from patron to staff, or staff to patron, or staff to staff. Remember that while wearing the face covering, you should still continue maintaining 6 feet of space or more with whoever you interact with outside of your own household. Avoid people who are sick, and if you're feeling sick, please stay at home. Wash your hands thoroughly and often, and use hand sanitizer when water and soap are not available. So I'd like to wrap up my briefing today with some pretty exciting news. We've secured a lease at the old Garden City warehouse on Flynn Lane for our county testing clinic. The fairgrounds has been an excellent spot for us and for our community during the spring and summer. However, that site doesn't offer the long-term sustainable testing operations that we need to continue serving Missoulians throughout Montana's seasons, from sun to rain, hot, heat, and fire season to ice and snow. So we needed to identify and secure space that would allow us to be the ability to serve residents year-round while continuing to maintain high safety standards for staff and the public on site. This new facility has plenty of room for everything that we need. There are office spaces for operations staff. There is a warehouse that will be used as the drive-through clinic. We thank the Missoula County Fairgrounds for setting us out on the right foot, and we look forward to transitioning our new operations to 4025 Flynn Lane, which is just off of West Broadway, and we'll be making that move in the coming days. This move will not impact our current testing operations. We don't expect to have any lost testing days. We're hoping to actually begin testing there next Monday afternoon, July 27th. So we look forward to continuing to serve the community and continuing to move forward together. Please mask up and stay safe out there. And that's it for my daily briefing today. As always, you can subscribe to me on YouTube under my name, Cindy Farr. That's CindyFarr. Click that little notification bell so you get notified when additional videos are uploaded. You can get lots of great information on our website at missoula.co/cvirus. You can call 258-INFO for any questions that you might have about COVID-19 or to schedule a test through our drive-through testing facility. And you can follow us on Facebook for lots of great information there under the Missoula City County Health Department Facebook page. So until Monday, everybody, stay safe and healthy out there, and you'll be hearing from our environmental health folks tomorrow.
Well, there you have it. I want to thank you guys for joining me on my morning show, Wake Up Missoula. A couple of more announcements in terms of MCAT. MCAT is working with the Missoula Fairgrounds. I mean, I was going to say Missoula County Fairgrounds, but actually the city kind of engulfed the county, so it's kind of like the Missoula City County Fairgrounds. But Missoula, MCAT especially, is going to be working with Missoula Fairgrounds and their rodeo, their 4-H shows and stuff like that. There's a lot of things they're having us do during the fair. They're still doing the animal shows and that kind of stuff. But part of this is that they're having MCAT film the majority of these shows happening, and MCAT will also be live streaming it sometime next in like 2 weeks. I'll have a more detailed list of exactly what MCAT will be doing next Friday. So if you're interested, like always, you can go to MCAT.org. But for right now, I'm going to end my show. So for Wake Up Missoula, I'm Scott Raff. Take care, guys.